Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Chrissy Raywalk, Director of Intercollegiate Athletics at the University of Delaware. One of the things that I appreciate and enjoy most about leadership is that it's a journey, not a destination. It involves lots of different twists and turns, and you need many different types of people to go along with you on your journey in order for it to be successful. So today, I invite you to start your leadership journey with this podcast. Enjoy.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Our guests today are Lee Reed. Lee is the Director of Intercollegiate Athletics at Georgetown University, and Matt Behrens. Matt is a Georgetown alum, former student-athlete, and a supporter of Georgetown Athletics. Greetings, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Ty. Great to be here.
Now, I have you on because, Matt, the Behrens family is a big supporter of Georgetown Athletics. And Lee, in the news recently, we saw that the Behrens family helped create a diversity, equity, and inclusion position there in athletics. And I'm excited to have a supporter and an athletic director on because that dynamic in terms of athletics, I think, is very important. To start the conversation, Matt, I'll give a little bit of your background. Of course, I mentioned that you were a former student-athlete and alum. You played lacrosse at Georgetown during the Big East Championship year, and you're currently a Georgetown law student. Your mother, Mary, was a member of the track team at Georgetown, and your brother also attended Georgetown. And as I mentioned, your family endowed the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion position. And then Lee, you're also the Director of Athletics at Cleveland State. You spent some time at Eastern Michigan University and coached basketball for a while at University of New Mexico. And you created the Cooper Athletics Leadership Program. And diversity of equity and inclusion is a big thing in your initial strategic plan upon arriving. And you operate off the mantra that things will be student-athlete centered, coach-driven, and administrator-assistant. I've always liked what you've done, Lee. Of course, we did a video over on Athletic Director U talking about what you do there for student-athlete development. Matt, the question I have for you is the Behrens family has a long history with Georgetown as a school and specifically Georgetown athletics. Walk us through some of the history that your family has with the institution.
Yeah, absolutely. So my mother, Mary Behrens, came onto Georgetown's campus in '79, I believe, as a scholarship athlete, a track and field runner. And you know, she was a Title IX baby, as I say, which kind of gave me a glimpse that, you know, the issues we're talking about, the gender equity, the racial equity, the social justice goals that these universities and that our teams have, you know, they must be fought for. They won't just happen without trailblazers, without people willing to put themselves out there and face resistance and face backlash. And so my mom directly received the benefit from the Title IX movement before her, and so we say she was a Title IX baby. From there, she became a supporter. She was a co-captain her senior year of the track and field team, and ended up becoming a supporter of Georgetown. Has served on the Regents board in the athletics committee. She had the honor of winning the John Carroll Award, and she's been a huge supporter of the kind of development of the student athletes that have come after her. And you know, me having the honor of being able to play lacrosse at Georgetown, I was recruited my junior year of high school, which was late for lacrosse kids back then. Kids were getting signed essentially freshman year, sophomore year, and so for me, Georgetown was kind of my last, you know, kind of D1 hopes. And I ended up getting recruited, Coach Kevin Warren, and had a kind of a long career, 4 years of ups and downs. We ended up my sophomore and junior year going 2-12, 4-10, and then our senior year, I had, you know, a group of kind of day one seniors with me who, you know, decided this had to change, and so we ended up winning our Big East championship, making it to the first round of the tournament, losing to Hopkins, but kind of culminating that career. And, you know, seeing the kind of lineage that my mom had where you get back of the sport, you get back of a community what you put into it. And so she definitely instilled those values into me, and something that, you know, we are looking forward to continuing with Georgetown in the future.
Right. You mentioned something that's interesting to me when you talk about the evolution of a student athlete or the evolution of an athletics program. Obviously, you experience various forms of leadership and influence. And it sounds like you said, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, that your senior year, you guys said, hey, we can either go out the same way we came in with the records we've had, or we can take this up on ourselves and make this happen for us. Tell me a little bit about that. What changed in terms of you guys as seniors, in terms of communication with the coach? Because the coach is who he is, right? And you guys seem like you took the reins on yourself. So talk to me a little bit about that process and how that helped lead to winning a Big East championship.
Sports is a metaphor for life. Sports is a metaphor for what this country needs. And what I saw the biggest difference, the biggest change in the team culture from a 2-12 season versus a Big East championship season is one simple thing. It's is every single player on that team bought in and willing to sacrifice for the common goal. And that is something that you can speak about. You can preach about it. You can have our coach, Kevin Warren, who is a fantastic motivational speaker and someone who I hope I can channel some of his fire in my talks. But he's been saying the same thing all 4 years. It was whether we as a collective body, as individuals, willing to see our value on the team, willing to say, I'm willing to sacrifice for the guy next to me. I'm willing to stay after practice, do as much as it takes to develop myself because I know there's a kind of larger goal here. For me, I mean, to be honest, I didn't hit that kind of fire, that kind of drive truly until my senior year when I kind of saw this clear fork in the road where I could go to that next level and I could develop myself because I know my team needs it, or I could have stayed like I had been the last 2 years and kind of just, getting along, just not really putting in that deeper work. So my sports career, especially my senior year, it really truly helped me learn how to fight for something, fight alongside people for something, and develop those kind of roots of strength and authenticity that I'm now kind of channeling in my legal advocacy career, fighting for vulnerable people in this country against kind of oppressive situations. So it's lifelong lessons that I learned.
That you learn and apply. Now, Lee, now you can relate to everything he's talking about, being a former player, coach, and now over athletics, where you have to get everybody moving along in the same way. And when things are moving up and down, the celebrations and the challenges of athletics, of campus in general, talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you can relate to in what he said when you're talking about leading an athletics program and then having to get constituents, having to get the staff, having to get the coaches and the players, everybody on the same page, moving in the right direction.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think when you hear Matt tell his story of his career on the hilltop, I've been in this business for a very long time. And that example, that case study, is one of the best moments in my entire career, to watch Matt and his teammates just take ownership, things that people write about in textbooks, things that theoretically people talk about. This is how it should be done. This is what the difference is between success and not succeeding, both in life, as Matt said, but also in sport. And to witness that, to be close enough to sort of witness sort of the evolution of that class, those 13 young men, to really take us from sort of an afterthought in the world of lacrosse when we were still trying to build our identity to now something that has sustained a high level of championship caliber success a few years after Matt and his group left. But it brings warmth to my heart to hear Matt talk about that experience, and it brought tears to all of our eyes to sort of witness that when there is ownership by the group, yes, you can be the so-called leader, but you can be the head coach or the athletics director. But true success is when everybody in your organization feels an obligation to buy in. And that was truly, truly an amazing story. And I think it just touches the surface of Matt and what he meant to that program, to our department, because all along he was, not only was he a high level, high caliber lacrosse player on a legitimate national contending program, but he was also doing work in the classroom, and more importantly, with our culture in the community. So I can relate to all of it. It's one of those situations where it's a dream situation where they finally get it and see it and understand that it's not about the how the uniform looks, the field. It's not about what kind of locker room you walk in and out of each day. The head coach was the same. It really got down to a group of young men, a group of young people buying into and believing in what they were trying to achieve together, and they left an incredible legacy on our campus.
And I guess it ties into the student athlete centered, right? You saw what they did and the growth that they grew in their program. Coach driven, obviously, the coach is well respected by the players based on what Matt said. And administrator assistant, I wonder, and I think you hinted at it, is what you saw in that, was that infectious to the staff? How did that affect you guys in terms of how you do things operationally and executing those three things you say: student athlete centered, coach driven, administrator assistant?
Absolutely. I think, we're all sort of the same type personalities in athletics where we want to control things and we want to, there's a bunch of leaders in our department. And so everybody wants to take that sort of leadership role. But what we found is when you sort of step back and allow others to have ownership, right, and have responsibility, that it's a much, much better situation for everybody involved. And so that's sort of our mantra in terms of how I've tried to build a philosophy in our athletic department about, it's not about the athletics director. It's not about the administrators. It's first and foremost about our student athletes and their 4 years on campus, but then it's also about our coaches who drive sort of that daily success. And when you have the combination of that, putting student athletes first, allowing them to have a say in how the department is run, allowing their voice to be heard, and then you have excellent coaching, it makes for a wonderful work environment, and it makes for a wonderful, successful program. And so, yeah, it's to see it happen. I think we all witnessed it, and it just reinforced, especially over the last 5-6 months when things are hard, we're making tough decisions, and there's so many crises that are coming at us all at the same time, and higher education is under attack, and our country is going through some really difficult moments. It's remembering those things, the why we do what we do, right? The Matt Behrens, the men's lacrosse program, the coaching staffs that all put their life and blood into this situation. That's what keeps us going. That's what keeps you coming back every day. Even though you have a bad day, you get up the next day and you say, you know what? There's magic right around the corner, and we're going to get to it.
All right. Now, Matt, you mentioned helping out people who don't have the opportunities of others, who may have been wronged, who may be oppressed. Helping them with opportunities has been and is important to your family. Is that a part of the discussion you've had growing up within the household, dinner table, or those type of things? Because to support a position, which we'll get to here shortly, on campus, to endow in positions such as diversity, equity, inclusion, says a lot about the family. Talk to me a little bit about that and why that is important within a Behrens family household.
I would say I'd shift the framework. Instead of, me feeling like I'm helping someone, it's me standing with someone. It's me trying to create the conditions so that everyone can stand up for themselves. And so in that way, I see myself as a brother to the Black Lives Matter movement. I see myself as a brother to the women's liberation struggles and other struggles that continue today. You shift the framework. You become a teammate to other people in this country that are still being shackled by these unfair systems that we are continuing to grapple with today. I would say, yes, our family had these conversations. I definitely served as a driver at the dinner table for having these conversations, and I think it shows you the power. You talk about the evolution of a team, the evolution of families, the evolution of listening to your brothers, your parents, just as part of so much of my experience was getting to sit in on conversations with Lee, with other administrators, Sharon Brummel, for example, seeing their struggles, their pressures, their institutional incentives, all the things that they have to deal with in their everyday life, the questions that keep them up at night. For me as a student, it shifted the mindset away from, I'm not just kind of throwing rocks at an institution saying, hey, y'all need to change. I'm saying, how do I be part of the solution? And how do I learn to govern alongside people who are dedicating their lives to this kind of institution? And so that was kind of my maturity, and especially this year with COVID, I'm done just talking about what needs to change. I need to be part of the solution, and commit myself to that governance of it. And I'll say, my experience in college was very unique, and I think what Lee was hinting at is like we need to allow young people's uniqueness to thrive, right? I was the kid from Bronxville, the 13th wealthiest district in this country, who was then speaking on a Legacy of Malcolm X event panel discussion with big-time Georgetown professors as a first year, as the only white student, So I was kind of embodying this unique duality of what these stereotypes, what the ingrained notions of what a lax bro has to be. Not only feeling that from the outside, but grappling with that internally, right? Am I supposed to just keep quiet and thrive within this kind of current social environment, or do I want to make my authentic kind of gut check reality? When you walk into a party, when you walk into a space, a locker room, and you say, this is great, but there's something a little off here, right? Whether it's the way we're talking about women, whether it's the way we're using homophobic language, whether it's the way, what I saw with lacrosse, a predominantly white privileged sport, whether it's the way, we kind of tokenize the one or two black kids on our team. Like it's real. And I had a kind of fork in the road moment, throughout my first year where it's, you can sit by and do nothing, or you can allow your gut, which you feel, right? No one can feel that for you, but you feel, and I could do something about it, no matter how small. But for me, that developed my roots, that allowed me to kind of each year, as Lee was kind of alluding to, bring in speakers, bring in panelists, bring in, doing different events with the team. And for me, what that did was not only make my relationship with my lacrosse brothers way more authentic, where now after we've graduated, I feel like I'm still kind of serving in this almost like therapist role for a lot of my teammates, because I was the one that they could go to that wasn't just going to be the bro talk. It wasn't just going to be the party talk and the superficial culture that kind of guys are ingrained and trained to speak with. I could be someone that was authentic.
Right. Now we talk about 2020. We talk about the visualization. The rest of the world saw what a lot of the Black community has seen and experienced for the last, I would say, hundreds of years, right? In terms of understanding some of the peril that those of us in the Black community have been in when we see our brothers and sisters killed at the hands of police or chased down in the middle of the street in a neighborhood and murdered. And you think about the children of some of these guys or women have to watch these videos that go viral, and as they grow up, the videos are still out there and exist, and you think about what that does to someone's psyche. And like you mentioned, young people took to the streets and expressed their frustration at what's happening and what's not happening. And I imagine, Lee, that on campus you had to have some conversations with student athletes about these things. What are we doing as a university? What are we doing in athletics? What are we doing in our city, in our community, in the country to combat some of these things? Are we having these discussions? Talk to me about your process, Lee, leading the department and being a leader on campus of talking, engaging with students and student athletes, engaging with administration. And then you have to engage with the supporters to tell them, hey, these are what our student athletes are feeling. Walk us through that process, which I imagine led to the developing of this position there in Georgetown.
Sure. It's been gut wrenching to the last 5 months in some ways, and in other ways it's given me a lot of hope. I heard somebody, and I've stolen sort of this. It's not just a moment in time. This has become a movement for equal rights, for social justice in our country, for human rights, right, in our country. And I have to tell you, I was reawakened by some members of our football team. I was invited onto a Zoom as they were discussing sort of the murder of George Floyd and how that was impacting our football program. And Coach invited me on and said, hey, come just listen to our guys. And I have to tell you that I was in the midst of eyebrow deep COVID related issues. We were in the middle of, let's transition our student athletes home to their permanent addresses safely. Let's make sure they have what they need, not only from an athletic standpoint, but certainly academically, trying to finish the semester, mental health, all of the things that the wraparound services that we try to provide our student athletes when they're on campus. We were working on making sure we could provide those services to our 700 student athletes virtually, remotely. And so that's where sort of the bulk of my day was being spent each and every day, the impact of the NCAA decisions to shut down sports and how that impacted our spring sports seniors. All of these things were going on at the same time. And when I walked into that Zoom meeting with our football program, and as they discussed it, I had heard it, but I hadn't seen the video. And the first thing, your heart just sinks because you see the impact, the visceral reaction that our Black student athletes in that program were having, and they were confused, they were angry, they were hurt, they were sad. They wanted something to change, and they wanted it to change right away. And that sort of was my reawakening. And over the course of that weekend, that meeting happened on a Friday. Over the course of that meeting, our team, our group in the department, we huddled together and started to talk about, this is bigger than even I think I understood, again, because of all those other issues. What are we going to do? At the same time, our Black student athletes were really starting to sort of organize themselves because they wanted to affect change. As you can tell by Matt, we have some extremely talented, we have extremely motivated student athletes. And I think it makes sense because they come to Georgetown and part of their identity is the sport they play, but they also have other identities, including their academic identity that they need to feed. So it wasn't surprising to me that our Black student athletes were organizing themselves and demanding sort of change, starting at home, starting within our department. And while that was exciting to see, being in the middle of that with everything else going on, we had to catch up to their sort of intensity, right? We had to catch up to where they were on it. But I'm proud of our department and our coaches for how we've tried to help our Black student athletes to get to where they are today. And frankly, I'm proud of them for helping us get to where we are today because they formed the Black Student Athlete Coalition. And essentially what that is they want to make sure that they can change the systemic racism in the country, the systemic racism on campus that we don't even realize, the microaggressions, everything that a Black person in America experiences, they want that to be changed. And so they had a list of demands that they came up with, and we have been meeting with them weekly to really get through those demands and understand it. And I have to tell you, as quote unquote athletics director, when somebody says they're demanding something from you, it forces you to take a step back and say, whoa, wait a minute, demand, because that word is so strong. And so we had to get past that and try to really understand where they were and try to meet them where they are. And even though, and I've kidded with people since, I've only been Black 59 years of my life. And, right. and while you and I have kind of experienced this our entire life, the energy around this movement is totally different than anything I've seen before, partly because you're able to catch these things on video now, so they have a life beyond the actual. It's not just what you heard happened on the street. You literally watched that. And the reason I am optimistic is again, the work that we're doing in our department with our diversity, equity, and inclusion subgroup that's working with coaches. It has coaches, it has staff, it has student athletes. With the alignment and engagement we've had with our Black Student Athlete Coalition, our other student athletes are leaning into this conversation. So I could pick any sport and they can share with me sort of stories for how they're sort of meeting this moment and trying to not only educate themselves, but trying to understand how they can be better, how we all collectively can be better in this moment. And what I've tried to tell our group is that this is not a sprint. even though we're going hard at this, this is something that we're going to have to build into our daily DNA. And the one thing that's really been good out of this as well is I think our community has stepped up. And I was so happy when we really briefed our top and our most loyal group 50. We had our top 50 donors, alumni that were on a Zoom. And I was asked the question about what's going on campus. They were like, how are the Black student athletes? How are they handling this? How are they managing this? And I just shared all of the stories and all of the work and all of the pain that we're going through. And we had that call. It was about an hour and a half. And Matt's mom, because she, by the way, chairs our Regents Committee, which is our Regents Athletics Committee. And so she's just been in so many different leadership roles for us and advocacy roles for athletics over the years, even before I got to Georgetown. But I get an email from Mary, and she said, I want to know more about the position you talked about today, the diversity, equity, and inclusion position, and our family wants to support it no matter what the cost. And I'm like reading this email, laying in my bed, and tears come to my eyes because it people care. And not all people are bad, and people are stepping forward in this moment. We call them allies, but they're other human beings. And I've told our student athletes, all of them, that Matt's generation, their generation will be the generation that affects the most change in this space. They just don't tolerate this type of thing, right? The way it's been tolerated in the past, and I truly believe that. But knowing how much sort of impact that Matt has had, not only on our department, not only around his dinner table, as he talked about, it didn't surprise me that the first outreach would come from the Behrens family. But what surprised me was the magnitude of support that they provided without a whole lot of conversation. And so, literally, tears to my eyes when I got that email.
I guess the key question I have, and I don't know if you have this question too, but were you able to get back to sleep after that phone call came with the good news that you received?
And the answer is no, because I started texting my senior staff.
Exactly, right. Everybody had to wake up at that time.
Yeah. I was just so excited. I was so excited, and it's just a major. We posted the job. It takes some time, as you know, in higher education, but we've been able to create the job description, and we just recently posted the job, and we're looking forward to having somebody on campus or in our department later on this fall. I'm hoping Matt will be a part of that process. We've got to keep him close. He's on campus. He's in DC, even though we're all not together. But just having his influence in everything we do in this space going forward is going to be significant for our department.
Right. And Lee, correct me if I'm wrong. In your strategic plan when you first arrived at Georgetown, a position such as this was something you were looking forward to try to create if the resources presented itself, right? It was a priority for you, correct?
So to be clear, we did the strategic plan. It had already, before I got there, it was part of sort of the importance of Georgetown, right? It's just kind of sort of who we are. It was sort of words on a page, right? But we went through a strategic planning process a couple of years ago, and that's when we really recommitted to diversity, equity, and inclusion in a very intentional way. We created our committee. We talked about being able to create a position. That was a few years ago when we did that, not when I first got here. I've been here 10 years, but it really, we recommitted to doing this in a more intentional way. Before, we had fits and starts and trying, it was really ad hoc, and it was like, no, we've got to be serious about this. This is who we are, and we need to make sure we're bringing the proper attention to it. And so this position it's going to be incredibly important to our department, important to the work we're doing. It will touch our student athletes, our staff, our coaches. It will also be tethered to the university work that Vice President Kilkenny, Rosemary Kilkenny, has been leading this work for 35 years at Georgetown, and she is an icon in her own right in terms of the work she's done and the framework that she has established with President DeJoy. And so, again, while it sometimes it's hard, right? When you wear your values on your sleeve like we do at Georgetown, you're held to a higher standard. but we embrace that. And we also understand where we fall short and when we fall short, but that doesn't mean we failed. I'll give you an example. 272 slaves were sold by Georgetown University to keep the doors of the university open years and years ago, obviously. When that came to our president's attention, he could have looked the other way. He could have said, this is not the right time. But I'm so proud of how Georgetown embraced that. Think about that. We go to a school. I work for a place that now we know sold 272 human beings to stay open, and we've been open 230 plus years. There's not a lot we can do to totally make that up, but the university has responded in a very, and our president rolled up his sleeves and did that work, and we're still doing that work.
Right. Matt, I'll ask you a couple questions here and then we'll wrap. Now, you mentioned obviously your mother had her background there at Georgetown, and then you come on campus as a freshman. Involve yourself with programs and with things that are happening on campus from the day you stepped on. Grow into a leadership position as a senior on a team in lacrosse there. You probably over time, and even your involvement now, right, developed a healthy understanding of what's going on around campus in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Of course, Lee mentioned the vice president there who's been working on things for years. Are there other things going on campus that, possibly this position in athletics could probably reach out to try to make the experience, the student-athlete experience and the athletic experience even more valuable for those who come through the program?
Absolutely. First of all, Lee, again, brilliant answer, just, very inspiring. And again, the kind of honest leadership that we need, right? The fact that we are not dealing with one crisis right now. We are dealing with, as a country, as a people, multiple crises, obviously affecting all of us differently. And I think those fault lines need to be exposed. And that's where the honesty and integrity and moral courage comes in. For me, developing that kind of courage to recognize and do something about the dynamics on my team, that came from actually what started with a pre-orientation program with Maine campus. It was a pre-orientation program before classes even start called Y Leads, Young Leaders in Education About Diversity, run through a campus center, the CMEA, Center for Multicultural Equity and Access. And, for me, as being one of the only white, straight, wealthy kids in a room, having these very uncomfortable but extremely important conversations about identity, about these different systems that remain with us. For me, it was these consistent, routine-like series of having my eyes opened, having my own internal sense of superiority, entitlement kind of uprooted, developing these deep and ongoing relationships with classmates, which then allowed me to see these larger dynamics, right? It was through those organic, authentic relationships with people who became brothers and sisters of mine that I could see, oh, wow, it is very different to step onto Georgetown's campus as a black man, as a black woman, as a person of color, as a daughter of undocumented parents. It is a very different experience that most white students do not get exposed to. And so for me, having these conversations with a friend of mine who described his experience walking into he was a year older than me, and he said, let me tell you about my first experience walking into a party at Georgetown. I walked in there and the entire room shifted. They looked at me and said, you don't belong here. And so white students go, why are all the black kids sitting together, right? Why is microsegregation, happening again on this campus? Well, because these vastly different lived experiences are happening at the hands of this kind of white majority that I realized was alone, at worst reinforcing this exclusion, at best kind of staying neutral about it. But, I would love for this position to serve as a bridge between Maine campus because, student athletes are both students and athletes, and we do function within the community, whether we like it or not. And so, to harness that leadership potential, students who are dedicating their every day to a kind of a grind, a routine of self-betterment and collective betterment, if we can start to get those goals in line and build coalitions with main campus and classmates among the larger student body, I think we can kind of build those coalitions. We can truly make some positive, transformative change on Georgetown's campus, which will generate, start to generate the next generation of leadership in this country to kind of build that honest leadership that we need.
Matt, that was excellent information. Lee, you have definitely given us excellent information, and really in the relationship that is possible between a supporter of the program, the athletics director, and the campus in general. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to us here at One Question.
Thank you, Ty.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
That was Matt Behrens. He's a Georgetown alum, former student athlete, and supporter of Georgetown athletics, and Lee Reed, who's the director of intercollegiate athletics at Georgetown University. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.